you, but I think that's kind of obvious.
Why? Hello. Hello, all men. Oops, all men.
Welcome to the All Men podcast.
Instead of oops, all berries, it's oops, all men.
Now I'm looking for some crunch berries.
That is the mouth destroyer of cereals.
It is
especially the all berry.
It is rough on the gums.
Especially the all berry version.
Is that more of a mouth destroyer than the regular?
Yes, because the berries are what destroys your mouth. The like cereal pieces are fine.
No, they're edgy, man. They're edgy. They'll rip you up.
Cocoa Puffs will rip you up.
Although, if you let them sit a little bit longer, then they get that little bit of softness. Not quite soggy, that's too far, but a little bit of softness.
I'm going to start the actual podcast.
You mean we wasted our cereal conversation with not being on the podcast?
Oh, there's more to talk about. Hello.
Welcome to the cereal podcast.
It's seriously fun.
Something to eat.
I hope you can hear me. My mic is having some issues today.
Should we switch mics?
No. You talk more than I do. And what you say.
Should we fix that too?
And what you say is more important.
That's decidedly untrue.
Anywho. So if I hold my mic like this, it's for your benefit because I'm tired. I don't want to be out of the frame.
Or you're going to start your new MC career.
Call me MC Cozy.
Cozy Doze.
Anyway, what was the cereal that they used to... Oh, Chex.
Yes.
They used to advertise Chex as
that can also tear your mouth up.
Well, they used to advertise Chex as like the cereal that didn't get soggy.
Yeah, that's not true of any cereal.
That's false. And I used to love, there was a Chex commercial where this woman was eating a bowl of Chex and like doing other things. And she would take a bite, like the first bite. She was like, oh, of course, it's not going to be soggy. It's the first bite. And she'd go through all this thing. And like her last bite, she's like, oh my gosh, it's not soggy. And I'm like, that's
because they poured you a new bowl between takes.
You had 65 bowls of Chex while shooting this commercial. Anyway, what's your favorite cereal?
I don't eat a lot of cereal anymore. I used to be a huge cereal. I enjoy cereal. I just don't eat a lot of it anymore. Probably, if I were going to say a favorite, Cracklin' Oat Bran comes to mind, which is from probably from just.
That's not fun.
Then you obviously haven't had it. But I like almost all really pathetically sugary kid cereal stuff most of the time.
Oops, all berries.
Fruity Pebbles. I do like some Captain Crunch berries. The peanut butter Captain Crunches.
Peanut butter Captain Crunches.
I used to love the Monster Berry ones, the Blueberry and Count Chocula and stuff. Yeah, the boxes look dumb now. They look all modern.
They're trying to be retro with them.
Yeah, they're weird because it's modern retro. It's not like just go back and use the old stuff. I mean, just take the old packaging, but it's whatever. But I used to like those a lot, and then I had moral quandaries about monsters. And like, is this a sinful thing? But
I'm a Frosted Flakes girl myself.
Can't go wrong, man. I had like several years where I was on a major Frosted Flakes kick. Can't go wrong with that.
Some say they're great.
I have heard that.
So
yes.
But we are not talking about cereal today, unless Rich can somehow.
Maybe that's what Charlie Sheen once meant when he was talking about Tiger Blood.
I hope it's not Tony the Tiger's Blood.
Maybe he just meant he was eating Frosted Flakes.
Maybe. I am going to have to hold this mic because otherwise I'm just over here, and that defeats the purpose of having video. So I'll just hang out here all day.
That's where I sit.
What up?
So I'm just kind of I could set this on my body here. Hello.
The people who are just
what a weird podcast.
The people who are just listening to this are like, what is he setting on his body?
Yeah, anybody who's if you're still with us at this point in the podcast, I'm not sure if I should be exceedingly proud and thankful for you, which I am, or very concerned about your mental state.
Like those not watching the video version of the podcast, they just get the audio and they're like, "What is happening?"
When did we actually go live on this?
3 minutes ago.
All right,
3 minutes ago. So how are you going to tie cereal into?
We got issues.
How are you going to tie cereal into this? By the way, all over my TikTok, and I don't know if it's because we're doing this. I'm going to say it is. All I've been getting lately, and I'm not mad about it because it's a fantastic movie, are clips from The Prince of Egypt. Oh, such a great movie. Amazing soundtrack.
It's DreamWorks, right?
Yes.
I've been on
DreamWorks killed it with
I've
that.
been on a Jeffrey Katzenberg
Mm.
kick because after saving Disney's animation studios, they fired him for wanting to get royalties from it. And so he's like, okay, shine you guys. I'm going to go hang out with Steven Spielberg and make DreamWorks and just, take you out with all this.
That's an amazing movie and one of the best animated soundtracks in the universe.
There you go.
That and Anastasia. Also not a Disney movie. Also an amazing movie.
That one's not DreamWorks, though, is it? That's something else. I
That
think.
was DreamWorks.
I could be wrong.
I'll have to look it up. Talk about something important.
Like cereal, well, because we do important so well. It is an interesting thing. As I don't remember if we were actually on here casting or still fiddling around, but
20th Century Fox.
makes sense. But
My kicker surf.
sometimes it's but sometimes it's a challenge, to when we're getting together late in the week to talk about the previous week's sermon and text, because we're already, the week has gone on, right? So
Right.
we're doing Bible study in Romans,
Right.
in the middle of
You got
that.
a lot going on.
My brain's there, working on cities of refuge for next week and stuff, and looking at where we're going. And it's just, it's always fun to go back and try to work through it. But then I don't know if I'm particularly helpful as we do. But anyway, as we were looking at Deuteronomy 4, we're moving toward the end of Deuteronomy 4. We're not there yet. We'll get there this week. And as Moses has been recalling for them the history of their covenant with God and how he's been faithful, they've been unfaithful, and yet he hasn't abandoned them, and he's done all these great things for them. He's reminded them that there's only one God, and they should not be seduced by substitutes or imitations, and worship the created things rather than the Creator. Then today, he kind of springboards off of that same concept, just to focus in on the fact that there is only one God. There is no other. There's nobody else. Is just straight up saying, this is God. And so our core reality in verses 32 to 40 is that God's singular power and personal love for his people demand wholehearted devotion. And so this portion of early Deuteronomy, where we're only in chapter 4 out of 30 some chapters, as we are progressing, we've gone from this covenant history into now what you might look at as a covenant motivation. Mm-hmm. So why should you obey God? Why should you worship him? Why should you live wholeheartedly for him? And so having looked at what he's done in the past, looking at now who he is, he's straight up commanding them, don't get into this foolishness of having any substitutes or imitations, because there is no other God. And even in, as we saw last week, even in looking forward, when Moses uses if language, later he'll use when language. In fact, even last week he did that as well. If you get into the land after all these generations and you wander away and you turn your heart toward other gods, then God's going to cast you out. You'll perish quickly from the land. And so when that happens, you're going to go into these pagan lands, and you will then worship these false gods of stone and wood and so on. And there's a pretty clear implication there that becomes clearer when we see this week's text, that while you're in exile, while you're away, worshiping these gods that everybody else wants, because the heart wants what the heart wants, or however people say it these days. So you want you want a God that you can see. So you wander away and you start worshiping created things that God created, the sun, moon, stars, or things that you created, which is even dumber. I mean, but we do that, right? We talked about that last week with the worship the adoration that we give to our smartphones and so on. But he's saying part of the punishment for this is that you're doing it. Mm-hmm. So now you're turning to gods that can't possibly help you. They don't care about you because they don't actually exist. It's a statue you made.
Well, I want to talk about that.
Okay.
Is this the platform for that? we talked, like you said, we talked about last week about, idolizing. You can pretty much idolize whatever in your life, whether it, like you said, your smartphone or your job or whatever.
Yeah, anything that you ascribe worth and value to that is due only to God.
Right.
So if you prize and prioritize something in such a way that it distracts from the glory that is due to God alone,
Right.
that takes your attention and affection away from your primary love, that becomes an idol.
And I can understand that, and I can understand the temptation of that. I can understand the risk of that. I can understand how we always need to be on guard of that. What I don't understand,
How the check stays crunchy and milk the whole time,
correct.
which it doesn't.
So thanks for answering that. Anyway, what I don't understand is how, and I'm sorry if I'm offending somebody here. I actually care. Rich doesn't. Cares if he offends you. I've never really understood, and maybe people would argue this about Christianity as well, because we can't see God. I've never understood how somebody can create a statue, let's say, or some kind of shrine or
Sure.
whatever, and literally think that this man-made thing is going to give you anything.
Yeah.
Just like, and I'm sorry to the Catholics, just like I've never understood, I went to a Catholic college. I've never understood why they pray to specific saints who were just people at one time. Like my roommate would lose her keys and she'd say, "Oh, I need to pray to Saint so-and-so, the patron saint of lost things," or whatever. And I'm like, so, and maybe even that makes more sense to me than just like a statue that somebody made. But I don't, or somebody going to confession to talk to a priest and say, "I did this and this and this," and the priest says, "Okay, say these things, do these things, and you're good." What?
You are going hard today, aren't you?
Sorry.
So, no, don't be sorry.
I don't understand it. I'm asking for clarity.
That's why we're here, is to try to connect the reality of God to the realities of life, right? And so as we're
or things like
doing
Buddha.
this, and so all of these things are similar
right.
in the confusion of them, but they're not the same. So they're to separate those out. So the issue that comes in, and this is something that was really big during the time of the Protestant Reformation, and you had the whole iconoclasm controversy, where folks that were in a particular stream of the Reformation, Luther would not be a part of this. The Lutheran movement wasn't quite this way. Luther didn't completely leave some of his Catholic practices behind. That was something that developed over time. And anyway, so as you're looking at that idea, at the iconoclast stuff, the picture was, we can't have any of these icons. We can't have any pictures. And some, in Reformed Calvinist circles would go so far as to say you can't have any art in the churches. Some of the radical reformers would do the same thing. So we're not having any art. We're going to have it plain. We're going to have it stripped down. We're going to go the complete opposite way. So the Roman Church had become very ornate over the centuries, right? So some of that is a temple mentality. So in looking at how the temple was built, it was very ornate, right? God put things together in this way. And so having these ornate things that are visual, that are engaging the senses, the thought was, we're honoring God through this. Now, the human tendency to create idols can take those things that have a good intent and then turn them into something that they were not intended to be. So when you look at, it's not the same, but when you look at the Old Testament temple and the Jewish priests and so on, there's a distinct similarity in, let me say, in form and fashion to what you would see in the Roman Catholic Church. Not the same, not trying to say it's the same, but there's a similar dynamic, what a lot of Reformed folks might call the smells and bells, right? You got incense and all these kinds of things that are going along with it. So the stained glass windows and all those types of things were, to a large extent, an attempt to convey gospel truth to non-literate people. So we don't have the scripture for you to read. Many people during medieval times were not literate to begin with. And so how do we do this? We do it through the Passion Plays. We do it through the stained glass windows. And you can debate whether that's right or wrong, but that was kind of what happened. And so along the way, because the doctrine was not, how do I say this appropriately? The truths of biblical doctrine were not effectively and accurately diffused and disseminated through the people, through the parishioners and the normal folks in the pew. The clergy had their idea, and increasingly over time, a lot of the clergy didn't really know either. That you had a lot of untrained clergy, that you had a lot of unsaved clergy, that people that were in the job but didn't know Christ or didn't even know church tradition as well as they should, and certainly didn't know the scriptures. Luther was a monk and a professor and had not really read the New Testament until later on. So there was, you focused in your areas. And we get that. I mean, doctors specialize. You can specialize in the spleen, right? And so there's just different areas of focus. So you get really good at one area, and then that comes at the neglect sometimes of other areas. So when you look at the development of praying to saints, the image of Christ was as the warrior prince. You see some of the medieval pictures of Christ. They're very often the Christus Victor, the idea that it's not just the Lamb of, kind of transition from the Lamb of God to more austere. And so in a crass way, I just heard a Catholic television show kind of talk about this. It's fictional, so it doesn't really matter a ton. But they're saying, well, Jesus has better things to do than to listen to me. We've all got these prayers. You don't mess with Jesus. I think we talked about a comedian that said something similar. So you go to his mom, or you go to the saints, to get them to go to Jesus. So you're not technically, they would say, you're not praying to these saints to do the thing, but to go to Christ on your behalf, to go to the Lord on your behalf. I'm trying to say this as charitably as I can. I think it's a really very badly flawed doctrine, and does unintentionally amount to a form of idolatry. At the very least, I would consider it blasphemy. Which, when you say blasphemy,
least,
when you say, but yeah, it's not exactly the least, but that's, I think that's what you're doing. You're doing the things unintentionally that Moses is talking about here, by creating some form to help you wrap your mind around the God who's bigger than your mind. So then you pray with the rosary, which is a tool. It's like, guiding a guided prayer in a lot of ways. However, in that tool, for a lot of folks, that rosary becomes the charm, the talisman, the good luck charm kind of thing, which is very similar to what we see in pagan religions. And that's not the intent, but the effect ends up being very similar in some dynamics. Honestly, I think we see that in the evangelical world when we worship the Jesus of the chosen, or whatever image we create, and we repackage or rebrand God to something that makes sense to us. So I think that's kind of the dynamic that you're looking at.
But I don't mean to dog on the Catholics, so let me back it up a little bit, because what I'm actually concerned about, I'll bring up the Prince of Egypt again. There's a scene in the Prince of Egypt. It's the scene where Moses comes to talk to the Pharaoh, and his staff turns into a snake, and then the Pharaoh's staff turns into a snake, or whatever.
That's a lot of yucky snakes, by the way.
Yes. Why did it have to be snakes? Anyway, and so then, that goes through, Moses is doing this, and then Pharaoh's whatever are doing the same thing, that they can turn water into blood, even though it's not real blood or whatever. And in the movie, there's a song, and it's Steve Martin and Martin Short, and they do a great job with those characters, as expected. But there's a scene where it's the start of a song, and they're listing off dozens of gods.
Yeah.
And they're calling on these gods that they worship, and I'm sure, I don't know them obviously what each one, but I'm sure each of those gods is supposed to serve a specific purpose. Right. The god of whatever. And I guess my problem is whether it's those gods or gods that people are still worshiping today, or a statue or whatever, you know that they're not actually doing anything, right? Like, like if there, I don't know if there is, but if
Do
somebody
they know that?
if somebody believed in a god of rain,
Right.
I'm sure somebody does. There probably is one. If
Sure.
somebody believed in a god of rain and you prayed to this god of rain for it to rain and then it didn't, like, that's probably a dumb example. Or like, I pray to this god of fire to do
Yeah.
this, and this, and then that doesn't happen because that can't happen. Like, do you get what I'm saying? When you're,
But what about when it does? That
well,
gets
it's eventually
confusing.
gonna rain.
Right.
But like,
So then,
I don't know. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, there are also atheists who probably are not listening to this podcast, but there are atheists who would say that's exactly what you're doing with your prayers. You're so as they're praying to their so-called gods and they don't get the answers, well, then there's something wrong. Either this is not the will of that God at this moment, or there's something wrong with me and I need to get that right. I need to make a better sacrifice and all that kind of, just like the Baals in First Kings, or the Baal prophets in First Kings, when they're being confronted, pardon me, by Elijah, and they're doing all these things to get their Baal god to bring down fire from the sky.
But where did Baal come from?
The sinful wickedness of the human heart worshiping things, you know.
But that's what I'm saying. He was created by man. Nobody's
Yes.
ever argued, right, that God was created by man.
Well, yeah, people argue that all the time. That's God is a construct of the weak mind. That's a
I'm
crutch that
upset.
you lean on. So the dynamic there then is we are made to worship, right? God's created us
You
in
gotta
His
serve
image,
something.
and so we've got this second time in 24 hours that reference has come up. I just made that last night in 18 hours. Anyhow, God's made us to worship Him. And if we don't worship Him, we're going to worship something, whether that's self or whatever else. When let's spin that into, the worship of self. I don't have control over anything.
Right.
I always act like I do. I think I control. How often do we get stressed? Do we get anxiety because we need control, but we don't have
24/7.
control, and we're not going to have control. So that's a false god that can never deliver what we want it to deliver. People who are worshiping health and fitness, so I can live, and you don't control any of those things. Obviously, your choices have consequences. It determines your destiny, but the truth of the matter is, I can work out, run marathons, be super healthy, never never have high cholesterol or any of these
You could
things.
drop dead tomorrow.
And I could drop dead tomorrow.
Yeah.
And might get hit by a bus, might get struck by lightning, or it might be an unexplained just death, right? We don't control those things. So every one of these things that whether it makes sense to us, because we can logic through our own wisdom, or whether it doesn't make sense to us because why in the world are you worshiping a statue you just carved yourself?
That's
right?
my issue.
It's all the same. It's all you're worshiping a pet rock, basically. That
Right.
this is it doesn't make sense. The only thing that ultimately really does make sense is to worship God, but we suppress that truth by our wickedness. So when we're talking about the idea in their situation or in some tribal religions today, where you're worshiping something that is a made up thing, it's essentially it's you're worshiping a perception of a deity that is represented by that idol, which is why you've got you're making the little silver shrines to Artemis or Diana in Ephesus. That's why you've got little idols. Every family has their own little family idols. It might be for the same gods. So you might have 6 different families all worshiping Baal, and they all have Baal idols in their homes, kind of like the Buddha. It's a reminder. It's an icon. And Buddhists don't see Buddha as a god, although the effect is not entirely different, right? So we are elevating something, whether that's a mindset, a thoughtfulness, Eastern mindfulness, whatever it is, when we do these things, we are ascribing worth to them. That we're ascribing glory that is only due to God and God alone, which is why Moses is saying here, look, search all through history, ask around, check it out, go all the way back to the beginning of time, throughout all the known world. Has anybody ever done what God has done? And so he's given them this history, just reminding them, here's all the things you know about God. Spoke to you from the fire, gave you this covenant law back at Mount Sinai. You've seen these things. Your parents saw these things. He's delivered you. He's given you victories. He brought you through this wilderness, and you're here today. Okay, now, check it out. Has anybody ever done anything like this? Has it ever been heard about? Has it ever even been attempted by any God ever at all? There is one. There is no other. Now, the vast majority of the world believes that that's not true. That's true at their time, it's true at our time. So when they're here on the very doorstep, as it were, of Canaan, they're about to go in. They've already conquered the two kingdoms here of these Amorite kings, Sihon and Og. So they're starting to settle on one side of the Jordan. Then they're going to cross the Jordan. Jordy Nelson.
Up the Jordy.
So they're gonna cross over here. They're gonna go into the land. They're gonna conquer the rest of it. They're gonna not drive everybody out all at once, but they're gonna do this over time. As they go in, all of these people everywhere around them, Egypt where they came from, the land where they're going, none of those peoples, that I'm not saying individuals, although in all likelihood that's true too. But none of them believe that there is only one true living God. None of them believe that Abraham's God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Scripture, the God who created all things, they don't believe that this is true. They are worshiping, he might be a God, which is one of the big issues. So it's not just that you have your God and I have my God. It's that, okay, maybe all roads lead to God. Maybe all religions can be true. Maybe it's just God with a different face. So Islam's not that much different than Christianity. That Mormonism, it's kind of the same thing, right? They use the same language. They even have the King James Bible, right? So you got all these different mentalities today that aren't too different from what you would see in these polytheistic societies. There is some spirituality, and that's what matters, is that we believe something. And Moses is specifically saying, no, you must believe this and this only, this alone. And there is God's wrath because he is a jealous God and a consuming fire. And if you do not ascribe to him the worth and glory that is due his name, then you will be judged, because that's why you were created. That's why you exist. You don't get to make the rules. You don't get to call the shots. And God has demonstrated his power to you. He's also demonstrated his love, his personal love to you. So the singular power of God that's demonstrated on the mountaintop with Moses, as the mountain is on fire, even God speaking from the burning bush, all the ways that God has delivered them from Egypt with the tenfold plagues there. He's delivered them in war when they should have absolutely been decimated, and God has overcome far superior enemies. And he's telling them, look, this is what we're going to do here. You're going in, you're going to displace 7 nations greater, more numerous, stronger than you. And you need to understand, it's not because of you. There is one God, and this God is on your side. He's your covenant God. You are of all the people on earth, he's chosen you. The same thing is a reality for us to recognize, that if I've come to Christ, God has chosen to manifest all of his fullness in the Son, incarnate through the Virgin Mary, who then walked the earth, lived a perfect life, kept all of the requirements of the law that none of us do or can, and died in our place as our substitute. So he did all of this because God is personally intervening for those that he's chosen. Just as he chose Israel out of the world, he has chosen the church, his elect. He's chosen us out of the world and out of our own sin to say, I'm going to give this one a new heart so that this one can receive Christ and see with spiritual eyes what truth is. Now, we look at all of the things, idol worship and stuff, and like, that just doesn't even make any sense. Paul says that, essentially there are demons behind these idols. You're worshiping these idols. You're worshiping demons. I would say that's the same thing with our smartphones, even with our children. When we elevate them above God, when we make idols out of them, there's demons behind that as well,
Sure.
pushing. And we need to be watching for that. And I don't know that that's what Paul meant, but I think that's an extension of it. I think that's a logical application of the principle of what he's saying. And so for us, as we are walking through life, we need to be aware that there is no one like God. There is no other. He is singularly powerful. He has a personal love for his people, for his chosen elect people that he has given everything for. And if he was willing, while we were yet sinners, to send Christ, his precious son, his only begotten son, to die in our place while we were still his enemies, then how could we possibly think that his love for us, we should have unplugged the thing there.
At least there's only 5 seconds left.
How can we possibly think that his love for us will fall short in any other area? In all the things that cause us anxiety, that we don't control, that we want to control, it makes zero sense for us not to hand that over to God and say, look, you're God. You created all this and you love me. And I don't know why you love me, but you chose to love me. So I'm going to trust you. But we don't. So we make our own ability to control, our ability to understand into an idol, and it shipwrecks us real easily. Not that much different from what was that puzzling question about why in the world would people do this?
Right.
That's a valid question. Why in the world would I do the things that I do?
Attacked. Okay, we'll stop there. I'm sorry if I got us off the rails a little bit.
No, I think you got us on the rails.
Okay, well, again, I apologize.
Is that a rail sound? What was that? George is going to enjoy that.
I apologize for any audio issues you might have had. I hope that I was able to be heard, I think. At least you could hear Rich. That's what matters.
No.
Anyway, we'll try to get that worked out before next week.
What matters is if you can connect the reality of God to the realities of life.
That's a fact. And we hope we were able to work through that today. You answered my question, so I appreciate that.
All right.
All right. Thank you guys for listening. And if you haven't yet checked out the sermon from last week, you can do that on the podcast here or on Facebook or YouTube. You can check out the video version. And we will see you next time.
And we are on YouTube this time.
We are on YouTube.
Welcome back, YouTube.
You missed us. All right. We'll catch you later. Goodbye, YouTube.
I don't know if you missed us or not, but,